The wind howled like a living thing across the Montana plains, driving snow so thick that Jack Sullivan could barely see his horse's ears in front of him. He had been caught in blizzards before, plenty of them in his 32 years working cattle in the high country. But this one had come on faster and meaner than any storm he could remember. One minute the sky had been clear and cold, the next it was a white wall of fury that erased the world. Jack knew he was in trouble. He had been riding fence line for the Double R Ranch, checking for breaks before the worst of winter set in, and he had strayed too far from the main compound. Now, with visibility reduced to nothing and the temperature dropping so fast he could feel his fingers going numb, even inside his thick gloves, he needed to find shelter fast or risk freezing to death out here in the emptiness. His horse, a sturdy buckskin named Copper, pushed forward with the stubborn determination that had saved Jack's life more than once. The animal seemed to have some instinct for finding cover that humans lacked. Jack gave Copper his head, trusting the horse to lead them somewhere, anywhere, that might offer protection from the killing wind. That was when he heard it, a sound so faint he almost missed it beneath the shriek of the storm. A voice, calling out, human, female, desperate. Jack pulled Copper to a halt, straining to hear over the wind. There it was again, off to his left, a cry for help that sent ice down his spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. Someone else was out here, and from the sound of that voice, they were in worse shape than he was. He turned Copper toward the sound, squinting into the driving snow. At first he saw nothing but white, but then a shape materialized, a horse standing with its head down, and beside it, a figure on the ground. Jack dismounted before Copper had fully stopped, stumbling through snow that was already knee-deep. The person on the ground was a woman, dressed in fine riding clothes that were completely inadequate for this weather. She was trying to stand, one hand clutching her horse's reins, the other pressed against her side. Even through the snow, Jack could see blood on her fingers. "Ma'am," he had to shout to be heard over the wind. "Are you hurt?" She looked up at him, and even in the midst of the storm, even with her face pale and pinched with pain, Jack found himself struck by her eyes. They were the color of amber, fierce and intelligent despite her obvious distress. "My horse spooked at the storm," she called back. "Threw me into some rocks. I think I've cracked some ribs, can't seem to catch my breath properly." Cracked ribs in a blizzard, miles from help. This was bad. Jack made a quick decision. "Can you ride?" "I'll have to, won't I?" There was grit in her voice that he admired even as he worried about her condition. "There's an old line shack about half a mile from here, if we can find it in this mess. It's not much, but it'll keep us from freezing. Think you can make it that far?" She nodded, trying to pull herself up using her horse's stirrup. Jack moved to help her and she flinched at first, then allowed him to steady her. Up close, he could see she was younger than he had first thought. Maybe 28 or 30, with dark hair coming loose from its pins and that same fierce determination in every line of her face. "I'm Jack Sullivan," he said as he helped her into her saddle. "Double R Ranch, Victoria," she managed, gasping as the movement jarred her injury. Victoria Ashford. The name meant nothing to Jack. He was too focused on getting them both to safety to wonder about her last name or what a woman in expensive riding clothes was doing out here alone. He mounted Copper and took the reins of her horse, a nervous gray mare that seemed on the verge of bolting despite the storm. Finding the line shack in these conditions was like looking for a needle in a haystack while blindfolded. But Jack had worked this range for 5 years and knew every landmark by heart. He navigated by instinct and memory, looking for the slight rise where the shack sat, the cluster of rocks that marked the turn, the bent pine tree that stood like a signpost even in the worst weather. 20 minutes that felt like hours later, the dark shape of the shack emerged from the white. It was barely more than 4 walls and a roof, chinked logs with a single door and one small window, but it looked like a palace to Jack. He dismounted and helped Victoria down, noting how she bit her lip to keep from crying out when her feet hit the ground. The door stuck from ice and disuse, but Jack's shoulder convinced it to open. Inside, the shack was dark and cold, but at least the wind couldn't reach them. There was an old stove in one corner, a rough bunk against one wall, and a few pieces of broken furniture. Not much, but it would do. Jack got Victoria settled on the bunk, then set about building a fire in the stove. There was old wood stacked beside it, left over from the last cowhand who had sheltered here. And Jack sent up a silent prayer of thanks for whoever had been thoughtful enough to leave it. Within minutes he had a small fire going, and the temperature in the shack began to rise from deadly to merely uncomfortable. "Let me look at those ribs," Jack said, turning to Victoria. She had been watching him work with those fierce amber eyes, and he could see she was fighting to stay conscious. "I'm fine," she said automatically, then winced. "Well, perhaps not fine, but there's nothing to be done about broken ribs except wrap them and wait. You a doctor?" "No, but I grew up on a ranch. I've had my share of injuries." She started to unfasten her coat with trembling fingers, then stopped, looking at him uncertainly. Jack understood her hesitation. They were strangers, alone in a tiny cabin, and he was asking her to undress. "Ma'am, I give you my word as a gentleman that I won't do or say anything improper, but if those ribs have punctured a lung or you're bleeding internally, we need to know." Victoria studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well, But turn around while I remove my coat and shirt." Jack examined her as gently and professionally as he could, pressing carefully to feel for breaks. The ribs were definitely cracked, maybe broken, and there was a deep gash along her side that had bled considerably but seemed to have slowed. Nothing he could do about the ribs except wrap them, but the cut needed cleaning and bandaging. "You're lucky," he said finally. "Nothing seems to have punctured the lung, but you're going to be in considerable pain for the next few weeks." He found some relatively clean cloth in his saddlebag and used melted snow to clean her wound, trying to be as gentle as possible while she gritted her teeth against the pain. Once he had it bandaged and her ribs wrapped, Victoria settled against the wall of the bunk, her face gray with exhaustion. "You should rest," Jack said. "I'll keep the fire going and check on the horses." "Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. I seem to be considerably in your debt, just Jack, and you don't owe me anything." Anyone would have done the same. Victoria's expression suggested she doubted that very much, but she was too tired to argue. Within minutes, she had drifted into an uneasy sleep. Jack sat on the floor near the stove, feeding it small pieces of wood. Outside, the storm continued to rage. He thought about the Double R Ranch where his boss would be wondering what had happened to him. It was a quiet life he had built, unremarkable, but it was his, and he valued it. Hours later, Victoria's eyes opened. "How long was I asleep?" "Couple hours. Storm's still going strong. How are you feeling?" "Like I was thrown from a horse into rocks." She smiled slightly. "I don't suppose you have any food in those saddlebags?" Jack did, actually. Some jerky, hardtack, and a small tin of beans. He warmed the beans on the stove and divided everything equally between them. "Can I ask what you were doing out here alone?" Jack ventured when they had finished eating. Victoria was quiet for a moment. "I was visiting one of my properties, checking on how things were running before winter fully set in." "Your properties?" "I own some land in the territory." She said it casually, but something in her tone made Jack pay closer attention. "You said you work for the Double R Ranch." "That's right. 5 years now. Good outfit. Fair boss. And your boss, what's his name?" "Well, it's actually kind of complicated. The ranch was owned by Robert Remington until he passed about 6 months ago. Since then, it's been run by his manager, Tom Crawford, while the ownership gets sorted out. We haven't met the new owner yet." Victoria's smile was enigmatic. I see something in her expression made Jack's stomach drop. "Ma'am, you're not saying the Double R Ranch is one of my properties, Jack?" "Along with the Circle M, the Broken Arrow, the Silver Creek Spread, and about 40,000 acres of unattached rangeland. Robert Remington was my great-uncle. When he died without children, everything came to me. I own the largest ranching operation in Montana Territory." Jack stared at her, his mind reeling. This woman was Robert Remington's heir, the mysterious owner that the Cowboys had speculated about for months. He had just spent the last few hours ordering her around and wrapping her ribs in a freezing-line shack. "I didn't know," he said. "You didn't say, you didn't ask my full name, and even if you had, would it have changed anything? I was injured and we were both in danger. Titles don't mean much when you're trying not to freeze to death. Besides, I've found that people treat me very differently when they know who I am. It was rather refreshing to be helped simply because I needed help." Jack didn't know what to say. He felt off balance. This changed everything and nothing all at once. She was still injured, they were still trapped, and his job was still to keep them both alive. "You're angry," Victoria observed. "Not angry, just feeling like a fool." "Jack, look at me." She waited until he met her eyes. "You saved my life. You could have ridden past in the storm. Instead, you stopped to help a stranger. You got me to shelter, tended my wounds, shared your food, and asked for nothing in return. That kind of character has nothing to do with who employs whom still. If I'd known, you might have been more false." "You mean, more concerned with making a good impression than with doing what needed to be done?" Victoria shook her head. "I left Boston 6 weeks ago to come west and take control of my inheritance. Do you know how many men I've met who smiled to my face while calculating how they could manipulate me? How many managers and foremen who saw a woman and assumed I could be easily controlled? But you saw someone who needed help and you helped them. No calculations, no ulterior motives, just basic human decency. That's rarer than you might think." They talked through the afternoon and into the evening. Victoria told him about growing up in Boston, about her education and her parents' horror when she insisted on claiming her inheritance herself. She talked about Robert, the uncle she had met only a few times but who had written her long letters full of stories about ranch life. Jack found himself telling her things he rarely shared, about his childhood on a small farm in Missouri, about joining the army and seeing things that still haunted him, about drifting west afterward, looking for a place where his past didn't matter, about finding that place at the Double R, working alongside good men under big skies, feeling like he had finally found where he belonged. "You love the work," Victoria said. It wasn't a question. "I do. I'm not a fancy man, Miss Ashford. Don't have much education, don't own anything except my horse and saddle. But I'm good at what I do, and I take pride in that." "Victoria," she corrected. "And I don't think there's anything ordinary about good honest work. My uncle's letters always emphasize the same things you're talking about. That's why I came west instead of selling everything. I wanted to understand what he loved so much." Night fell, bringing even colder temperatures. Jack kept the fire burning, but the small stove could only do so much. Victoria was shivering despite being wrapped in every blanket they had. "You need to come down here by the stove," Jack said finally. "I'm fine where I am." "No, you're freezing. Come on before I have to make it an order." That got a surprised laugh from her. "That's not how the chain of command works, Jack. Tonight it is." They settled on the floor near the stove, sitting close together for warmth. Jack kept his manner carefully respectful, but Victoria seemed to take no notice of any impropriety. "Tell me about the double R," she said. "Not the numbers or the business side. I want to know what it's really like." So Jack told her. About Cookie, who made the best biscuits in 3 territories. About young Danny Morrison learning the ropes. About the spring roundup when they had saved a newborn calf. About watching the sun rise over the mountains and feeling like you were seeing the world being born fresh every morning. Victoria listened, asking questions that showed genuine interest. She wasn't some city woman playing at ranching. She truly wanted to learn, to understand the life her uncle had built. And somewhere in that long cold night, something shifted between them. When dawn came, gray and cold but blessedly clear, they prepared to leave. The snow was hip-deep in places, but the sky was clear and the wind had died. They could travel, if Victoria was strong enough. The journey back was long and difficult, with Victoria clearly fighting to stay conscious. Jack kept watch on her constantly, talking to keep her alert and focused. They reached the double R just after noon. Several hands were preparing to search for Jack, and their arrival caused immediate commotion. Tom Crawford came running from the main house. "Sullivan, thank God. We thought you were caught in the storm." And whose recognition dawned. "Miss Ashford." "Mr. Crawford, I apologize for arriving in such a state. My inspection tour was interrupted by the weather. You were the rider heading toward the North Range. We had no idea you were in the territory. I finished my business early and decided to get started." Victoria swayed in the saddle, and Jack was beside her instantly. "She's injured," he said to Tom, "thrown from her horse, broken ribs. We sheltered in the North Line shack." Tom's eyes widened at the implications, but he simply nodded and called for help. Within minutes, Victoria was being helped into the main house. Jack watched her go, suddenly feeling the loss of her presence. He was turning away when Tom caught his arm. "I need to know exactly what happened. Miss Ashford is one of the wealthiest women in the territory. You two were alone together for how long? About 16 hours. And it was all completely proper. I tended her injuries, kept her warm, and got her back safely. Nothing happened that any gentleman wouldn't have done. I believe you, Jack, but you need to understand, there are people who won't. The best thing you can do is keep your head down and stay away from her. Let this blow over quietly." Jack nodded, though something in him rebelled at the idea. The next 3 days were strange. Jack went back to his regular work, but everything felt different. He caught glimpses of Victoria touring the facilities, slowly taking control of her inheritance despite her injuries. On the 4th day, Tom came to find him. "Miss Ashford wants to see you now." Jack's stomach dropped. This was it, he thought. She was going to let him go, worried about gossip. He had saved her life, and now he was going to lose his job. He knocked on the door and was led to the study. Victoria was sitting behind the big desk, looking every inch the wealthy owner. But her eyes lit up when she saw him. "Jack, thank you for coming. Please sit down." He sat, feeling awkward in his worn work clothes. "Ma'am." "Back to ma'am, are we? I thought we had moved past that." Her tone was light, but he could see the hurt beneath it. "I didn't think it would be appropriate. The circumstances being that I own the ranch and we spent a night alone together, and people are talking." Victoria leaned forward. "Jack, I don't care what people say. I care about doing what's right. I don't need acknowledgement for doing what anyone would have done. We both know that's not true. I've been talking to the other hands. Do you know what they say about you? That you're the most reliable hand on the ranch. That you work harder than anyone and can be counted on in a crisis. Tom Crawford told me that when the north pasture fence went down last spring, you worked for 36 hours straight. You're the kind of man who doesn't just do what he's told, but sees what needs doing and does it." "I just do my job, Victoria. And yes, you do your job exceptionally well, which is why I'm offering you a new one." She pulled a paper from her desk. "I'm creating a new position, assistant ranch manager. You would work directly under Tom, helping oversee operations. The pay is twice what you're making now, plus a share of the profits. You would have your own house and a real voice in how this ranch is run." Jack stared at the paper. "I can't accept this. People will say you're rewarding me for the wrong reasons. Let them say whatever they want. I'm offering you this because you're qualified, because you've proven yourself over 5 years, and because I need people I can trust. The fact that you saved my life is just confirmation that my judgment is sound. I don't have the education for this." "Then we'll get you a tutor, Jack. I'm not offering you charity. I'm offering you a job I genuinely need filled by someone I trust. You can say no. You can go back to riding fence line and nothing will change. But I'm asking you to take a chance on something more." Jack looked at her. This woman who had stumbled into his life during a blizzard and changed everything. He thought about the connection he had felt, the way she had treated him like an equal despite their differences. He thought about the safe, small life he had built, and the bigger life she was offering. "Why me?" Victoria stood and walked around the desk. Because when you found me in that storm, you didn't see an opportunity or a problem. You saw another human being who needed help, and you helped. No hesitation, no calculation. And when you found out who I was, you didn't change. You stayed yourself. Do you have any idea how rare that is? They were closer than was proper. Close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her amber eyes. I need people around me I can trust, Victoria continued softly. People who value honesty over opportunity, who care about the land and the work. People like my uncle was, people like you. Say yes, Jack, take the job, help me build something good here. People will talk, let them. I've been talked about my whole life. Too educated, too independent, too willing to speak my mind. I am not going to live my life worried about gossip from people whose opinions I do unvalue. Jack made his decision. It felt like stepping off a cliff. All right, yes, I'll take the position, but on one condition. You let me earn it. No special treatment. I do the job right, or I don't do it at all. Victoria smiled. Deal. When can you start? Whenever you need me. Tomorrow then. The months that followed were the hardest and most rewarding of Jack's life. He threw himself into learning the business side of ranching. Tom Crawford proved an excellent teacher. Victoria provided tutors to help Jack improve his reading and writing, but it wasn't all work. As assistant manager, Jack found himself working closely with Victoria on decisions about the ranch's future. They rode the property together, discussing improvements. They debated breeding strategies and marketing approaches. And somewhere in all that professional collaboration, they became friends. Victoria was unlike any woman Jack had ever known. She could discuss cattle bloodlines with the same facility she brought to conversations about literature. She was equally comfortable in a saddle and a ballroom, though she made no secret of which she preferred. She challenged his assumptions, made him think differently, and treated his opinions with genuine respect. The gossip did circulate. Some said Jack had compromised Victoria and she had elevated him to save her reputation. Others suggested he was manipulating her. The most malicious claimed they were engaged in an affair. Jack hated the talk, especially the parts that impugned Victoria's character, but she handled it with grace. When a neighboring rancher made an insinuating remark at a meeting, Victoria looked him straight in the eye and said that Jack Sullivan was the finest ranch manager in Montana Territory and anyone who had a problem with her hiring decisions could take it up with her attorney. The man backed down immediately. Winter deepened, then began to ease toward spring. The ranch prospered under Victoria's ownership and the management team. She made good decisions, invested wisely, and treated her employees with fairness that earned their loyalty. And through it all, Jack was falling in love. He tried not to. He knew it was foolish. Victoria Ashford, heiress to a ranching empire, educated in Boston, was so far above him that even thinking of her that way was presumptuous. But love didn't care about social class or education or money. Love cared about late-night conversations in her study, about the way she laughed at his jokes, about how her face lit up when she mastered a new aspect of ranching. Love cared about the way she treated everyone with dignity. Love cared about her fierce intelligence, her stubborn determination, her surprising vulnerability when she admitted her fears. Jack kept his feelings hidden, buried under layers of professional courtesy. He would be her employee, her friend, her trusted advisor. But he would never burden her with declarations she couldn't reciprocate without social consequences. Spring came, and with it the roundup. Victoria insisted on participating fully, riding alongside the hands, working from dawn to dusk. Jack watched her, worried about her ribs, impressed by her determination, his heart aching with feelings he couldn't express. On the last night of the roundup, with the cattle settled and the men celebrating around the campfire, Victoria came to find him where he stood watching the stars. She had a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, and she looked tired but happy. Some of the men are saying this was the best roundup they've ever been part of, she said, coming to stand beside him. They credit you for the organization. It was a team effort. You always deflect praise. It's one of the things I admire about you. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Jack, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Why haven't you ever married? Surely you must have met someone. The question caught him off guard. Never met anyone who made me want to stop drifting, I guess, until recently. The words were out before he could stop them. Victoria turned to look at him, and in the firelight he could see her expression shift from curiosity to something else, something that made his heart race. Until recently, she repeated softly. Jack knew he should stop, should retreat behind professional courtesy. But standing here under the stars with her, after months of working side by side, after that night in the line shack when they had talked until dawn, he couldn't keep pretending anymore. Victoria, I know I have no right to say this. I know the difference in our positions, in our circumstances, but I can't keep silent anymore. That night in the blizzard, when I found you in the snow, I thought I was just saving a stranger's life. I had no idea I was meeting the person who would change everything for me. These past months, working with you, watching you turn your uncle's dream into reality, seeing your kindness, and your strength and your fierce determination, I've come to care for you in a way that goes far beyond professional respect or friendship. Jack, Victoria breathed, but he pressed on, needing to say it all before his courage failed. I'm not asking for anything. I know you could have your pick of wealthy men, educated men, men who can offer you the kind of life you were raised for. I'm just a cowboy with calloused hands and not much to my name beyond a good horse and honest work. But I love you, Victoria. I love your mind and your heart and your courage. I love the way you fight for what you believe in and the way you treat everyone with dignity. I love who you are, and I needed you to know that, even if it changes nothing." The silence that followed felt eternal. Jack couldn't read Victoria's expression in the dim light, couldn't tell if he had just ruined everything or if there was any chance, any possibility that she might feel the same way. Then Victoria stepped closer, so close he could feel the warmth of her through the blanket. She reached up and touched his face, her fingers gentle against his jaw. "Jack Sullivan, for someone so smart about ranching, you can be remarkably dense about other things. Do you really think I offered you that position just because you saved my life? Do you think I've been spending every spare moment working alongside you, riding the range with you, staying up late discussing plans with you, because I need another employee? You thought wrong. I've been falling in love with you since that night in the lion shack, when you treated me like a person instead of an heiress, when you showed me what true character looks like. Every day since then has only confirmed what I felt that night. You're the finest man I've ever known. Jack, your education, your bank account, your social standing, none of that matters to me. What matters is your integrity, your kindness, your strength. What matters is that when I imagine my future, I can't picture it without you in it." Jack's hands came up to frame her face, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. "Are you saying I'm saying I love you too? I'm saying that I don't care what society thinks or what anyone says. I'm saying that I want to build this ranch with you, not just as my employee or my friend, but as my partner in every sense of the word. I'm saying yes to a question you haven't asked yet, but I hope you will." Jack laughed, a sound of pure joy that startled a nightbird from a nearby tree. "Victoria Ashford, I don't have a ring, and this isn't a proper proposal with me down on one knee, but I'm asking anyway. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that you made the right choice when you said yes?" "I will," Victoria said, and then she was in his arms, and he was kissing her under the stars while the campfire crackled in the distance and the cattle lowed softly in their sleep. They married 6 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the ranch, with Tom Crawford as Jack's best man and half the territory in attendance. Some came out of genuine happiness for the couple, others came out of curiosity to see the heiress marry her cowboy. But Victoria didn't care about the whispers or the speculation. She stood beside Jack in a simple white dress, her hand in his, and spoke her vows with a joy that silenced even the most cynical observers. The ranch prospered under their joint leadership. Jack's practical knowledge combined with Victoria's business acumen and resources created something greater than either could have achieved alone. They expanded operations, improved breeding programs, and built a reputation for innovation and fair dealing that made the Double R the most respected outfit in Montana. More importantly, they built a life together. They worked side by side during the day and talked long into the night about their dreams and plans. They faced challenges together, from harsh winters to market downturns, and celebrated victories together, from record calving seasons to successful new ventures. They raised children who grew up understanding both the value of hard work and the importance of treating everyone with dignity regardless of their station. Sometimes, on cold winter nights when the wind howled around the house, Victoria would remember that day in the blizzard when she had been thrown from her horse, injured and lost. She would think about how terrified she had been, how close she had come to freezing to death alone in the snow. And then Jack would pull her close and she would remember the moment. She had heard his voice through the storm, the moment a stranger had stopped to help another human being in trouble, not knowing who she was or what she could offer him. She would remember the long night in the lion shack, talking until dawn, building the foundation of something that would last a lifetime. "What are you thinking about?" Jack would ask, and she would smile and tell him the truth. "I'm thinking about how the worst day of my life turned into the best thing that ever happened to me. I'm thinking about how you saved me in more ways than one. I'm thinking about how grateful I am that you didn't ride past me in that storm. I could never have ridden past you," Jack would say, kissing her forehead. "Even if I hadn't known you were in trouble, I think some part of me would have sensed you were out there. Some part of me was already looking for you, even before I knew you existed." It was romantic nonsense, the kind of thing that would have made Victoria roll her eyes in her Boston days. But now, wrapped in her husband's arms, surrounded by the life they had built together, she believed it absolutely. Because some connections transcended logic or planning. Some meetings were meant to happen, orchestrated by forces larger than human understanding. She had been lost in a blizzard, injured and alone, and a cowboy had found her and saved her life. Neither of them had known then that he was saving the woman who owned the largest ranch in the territory, or that she was finding the man who would become her partner in every sense of the word. They had just been two people caught in a storm, helping each other survive, and from that simple act of kindness, from that choice to stop and help a stranger, everything else had followed. Love and partnership, prosperity and purpose, a family and a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. Victoria had left Boston looking for her uncle's legacy, expecting to find land and cattle and business ledgers. Instead, she had found something infinitely more valuable. She had found a home, a purpose, and a love that made every day feel like a gift. She had found Jack, who had looked past her wealth and her name to see the person underneath, who had valued her for her character rather than her assets. And Jack, who had drifted for so many years looking for a place to belong, had finally found not just a place but a person to belong with. He had stopped to help a stranger in a blizzard and found his future, found the other half of himself he hadn't even known was missing. They grew old together on the ranch, their hair turning silver, their hands growing gnarled with age and work, but their love never diminished. Every spring roundup, every harsh winter, every challenge and triumph only strengthened the bond that had been forged in a line shack during a blizzard, when two strangers had shared warmth and stories and begun to build something that would last forever. And on cold winter nights, when the wind howled just like it had that day so many years ago, Jack and Victoria would sit by their fire, hands clasped, and thank whatever force had brought them together. They would remember that sometimes the greatest blessings came from the most desperate circumstances, that sometimes getting lost was the only way to be found, and that sometimes the person you saved ended up saving you right back in ways you could never have imagined.